Resource Enhancement and Protection Conservation Education Program.
My name is Dave Williams, and I'm here to talk with you about designing a seed mix for a tallgrass prairie reconstruction. What is a reconstruction? That basically is a prairie planting at a site where there are no native species present. Can be an old cornfield, it can be an old pasture field that have non-native grasses. So we are talking about a reconstruction. The first thing you have to do is go out to the planting site and assess the characteristics of the planting site, because those characteristics will really dictate what species you include in the seed mix. This particular site is about a 5-acre site on the campus of the University of Northern Iowa, and this was actually seeded about 6 weeks ago. As you can see, there's definitely topography in the site. There's a higher spot, there's a lower spot. We have a little grove of pine trees up on this end, and so there's somewhat of a shade going on, and then there's full sunlight. And so each one of these theoretically should be dealt with, and you could design three different seed mixes for this one particular site. And whether you decide to use 3 seed mixes or just mix it all together in one seed mix and go that route is up to you. But you do have the option on a site like this to actually use 3 separate seed mixes. The goal here is to match each species with its ideal habitat preference. In other words, if you have a wetter spot on the site, you'll want to put your wet species there. If you have a dry part of the site, you want to put the drier adapted species there. If you have a moist or mesic part of the site, you'll want to use mesic species. If you put wet species in a dry site or dry species in a wet site, chances are you may get germination, but they will not persist in the plant community because you just cannot fool Mother Nature. This particular 5-acre planting site used to be the old driving range for the UNI golf team. And you'll see on the site there are actually elevated mounds that were tee-off mounds for the golfers. And this site was mowed turf grass for years and years, and it was sprayed every spring and in the fall for broadleaves. And so this site was heavily disturbed, and there really isn't any native vegetation out here whatsoever. This is a very altered landscape. The other point I wanted to make is that sometimes when you're looking at or you're dealing with planting sites that are in town, there's a high likelihood that the soil will be disturbed, and that's the case here. They actually graded some of this soil to create these elevated tee-off areas, and so the soils map may not reflect the actual disturbance on the site, and that's another good reason why you should go out to the planting site and actually conduct a site visit and assess the site physically instead of just relying on the soils map because of those kinds of disturbances that will not be listed in the soils map. I just want to illustrate that this is the second habitat. I showed you the first habitat, which is in the shade area, and that'll be a shade tolerant mix. This will be what we call a wet mesic mix. This is a lower spot. You can see there's a culvert, and all the water for the entire 5 acres drains into this corner. And so, if I were to actually take a soil core, we would see soil differences between here and up by the pines near the north or the south west part of the site. And so what we want to do is we want to match species that are adapted to a little bit wetter soils in this zone. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and measure, or just estimate at least where I think the wetter soils are going to be. And it'll be the same procedure as measuring the shaded area. I'll just start right at the culvert, and I'll go west, and then I'll head south, and then this is kind of an L-shaped area, so then I'll start here again, and then go south, and then go east. And so we'll kind of mark a boundary of this L-shaped wet area. I still need to go further west, and sometimes you can tell by what vegetation is there. This is smartweed, and that grows in a little bit wetter soil. So since I'm still seeing smartweed, I'm going to go a little bit further. I think I still have wet soils beyond here. Now we're going to look at the other part of the L that goes to the south and to the east. So I'm starting again at the culvert area, and then I'm going to go south and east and figure out what size of area that is. How far I can go before I start getting into drier soils. This feels like I'm starting to go up on the incline, so I'm probably going to stop somewhere about here. And you know, it's going to be your best guesstimate. I'll show you how to use the soils map, but even the soils map is a pretty crude estimate. You really have to go to the site and actually try to figure out where these soil moisture differences are. And you're much better off if you go out to the site and do that rather than if you try to go off the soils map. But I'll show you how to use the soils map to get a rough idea. Okay, so I've designated my south boundary of the part of the L that goes to the south, and now I'm going to go to the east and see how far this wet area goes to the east to get my final measurement. And I'll go right up to the boundary of the planting site, which is right up against these gray dogwood shrubs. And look at that, lo and behold, there's a sedge right here in fruit, right in front of me. A native sedge that we didn't plant, and it's just here on its own. So that'll be what I call a bonus plant. It's one native plant that's here. There's a nice clump of sedge here. Actually, there are a whole bunch of sedges in here, so we're looking good. We've already got a good start to our reconstruction. So then I'll measure the area that we've marked off in this wet site. And when I came out here before, I think it was right around about a ½ an acre. And so we've got a ½ an acre of wet soils that we're going to do a wet mesic mix on. And then we'll have about a 1/10 of an acre of shade area. And then the balance will be what I call a mesic mix. And mesic, just remember, mesic just means moist soil. And if you talk about it in relation to corn and bean ground, mesic soils are the most productive, and they were probably the most productive prairie soils when the native prairie was here. And so we'll go over that a little bit when we talk about the seed calculator. After we've looked at the site, there really are 3 separate what I call habitats here. There's a shaded habitat, which you could develop a shade mix for. There is a mesic habitat, and then there's what I would consider a wet mesic habitat down near the bottom of the site, and there certainly will be soil moisture differences, you know, among these three different sites, and so we'll want to design 3 separate seed mixes for this site. We'll start out with the shaded area first, and the first thing you need to do is when you do a site visit, bring some field flags and bring some sort of measuring device that you can actually measure out roughly the area, because depending on the size of the area of each of the habitats, we'll want to adjust our seeding rate accordingly. So I've got here a walking wheel, a pretty simple device. You just zero out the scale and you put it down on the ground where you want to start, and it'll tell you the number of running feet. I've got field flags that you can get at any hardware store, farm supply store. So looking at this area, I can see there's a huge shade area. So I'll just basically kind of guesstimate where the shade is going to be in this zone. And so what I'm going to do is designate this area as the shade area. So I'll put a flag in the corner, and then I'm just going to go with the walking wheel and go to where I think the shade will end. Now there is full sunlight out here, but it's early in the morning. It's only 9 o'clock this morning, so as the sun arcs around the sky, the shade will shift here. And so I've been here in the afternoon, and I know the shade gets into this area too. So we're about, I'm going to say about 70 feet on one side. I'll put a flag. oh, this ground is hard. We haven't had a rain in probably 3 weeks, and we're definitely in a drought. So this ground is kind of like cement right now. Okay, so then we'll go on the long side and measure it. Again, it's an estimate of where I think the shade will land at the site. It's okay if I'm a little over or a little under. There's bound to be a transition zone where, you know, the shade species will persist, and the species that are more adapted to full sunlight will continue on. So I'll let nature kind of work that out. Okay, so we're about, looks like about 85 feet on this boundary. So then we got the 3 sides marked out. I don't really need to measure this one. I can just walk over and put my flag in the final corner for our shade area. This also helps too for if you do the seeding, or if you have somebody else do the seeding, you can leave these field flags out, and then the person actually conducting the seeding will have a nice designated spot of where they know where to put the seed, the proper seed in the proper spot. So here we go. We got a nice square of shade. So this is going to be our shade tolerant mix for our tallgrass prairie reconstruction. Basically, I just take the length times the width and number of feet and divide it by 43,560 square feet. That's the amount of square feet in an acre, and so I can figure out, you know, the fraction of the acre. And I think I had already calculated this, and this area came out to about 1/10 of an acre. So when I design a seed mix, and I'll talk about this later when we go through the seed calculator, you'll enter in the square footage of where you want to seed, and the seed calculator will automatically calculate the quantity of seed that you need once you select your species, and we'll go through that later in this video.